Hell had a physical address: occupied Poland. The gates of Auschwitz and Majdanek did not lead to a mythological underworld. They led to a factory. Behind the desk sat a man who once baked bread in a German village. How does a baker become a technician of genocide? Erich Muhsfeldt did not just follow orders, he optimized them. He smiled while children disappeared into the maws of furnaces. He celebrated when the daily body count broke new records. The screams were part of the process. One young woman refused to go quietly. She fought. She managed to scratch Muhsfeldt's face, drawing blood. His response was mechanical. He tied her to a trolley. He pushed her into the white-hot crematorium while she was still breathing. He was not a monster from a legend. He was a man with a clipboard and a quota. This is the reconstruction of his career, from the ovens of a bakery to the chimneys of the Holocaust. Justice took its time, but it never stopped walking. We strip away the myths. We expose the mechanics of the Reich's most depraved killers. The truth is never comfortable. It is necessary. Muhsfeldt began his shift by checking the temperature of the bricks. Muhsfeldt checked the heat of the bricks. The furnace was ready. It was 1944, July 22nd. Soviet scouts moved through occupied Poland. They expected a frontline objective. They found Majdanek. Even the most hardened combat veterans froze. Was this a military outpost? No, it was a factory. The Red Army entered the gates at dawn on July 24th. Most camps were burned or blown up to hide the evidence. Majdanek was different. The SS fled in such haste that the machinery of death remained intact. Gas chambers, ovens, warehouses full of shoes. 500 prisoners remained. They were skeletal ghosts wandering among the cooling chimneys. Soviet commanders realized the scale immediately. They summoned international journalists. The world had to see. This was no longer hearsay. It was industrial reality. As the front collapsed, the pattern repeated. Allied forces swept across Europe through 1944 and 1945. Every liberation revealed a new layer of the nightmare. January 27, 1945. Soviet troops reached the gates of Auschwitz in occupied Poland. It was the largest extermination complex ever built. Between 1940 and 1945, the trains never stopped. 1,300,000 people were transported to this single coordinate. Most never left. The liberation process was just beginning. It would soon lead back to the man who made the ovens run. Muhsfeldt's name appeared in the first witness testimonies. Before the ovens, there was the baker. His name was Erich Muhsfeldt. He entered the records of the 1947 Auschwitz trials as a monster. But his story began with flour and yeast. 1913, Neubrück, German Empire. Muhsfeldt was born into a world of order. He finished 8 years of elementary school. By 1930, he was a certified baker. He had a wife. He had a son. He was an unremarkable man in a working-class neighborhood. What turns a baker into a specialist in mass disposal? January 30th, 1933. Adolf Hitler became chancellor. The political shift triggered something in the baker. That same year, Muhsfeldt joined the SA. He traded his apron for the brown shirt of the Nazi paramilitaries. In 1937, he moved to the SS. 2 years later, he carried a full Nazi Party membership card. He was no longer just a citizen, he was a cog in the state's hardware. September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. The Second World War began. For Muhsfeldt, the chaos of the invasion was not a crisis, it was an opportunity. He was 26 years old when he headed east to find his true calling. He arrived in Poland as part of the SS Totenkopfverbände. September 1939. The invasion of Poland changed everything for Muhsfeldt. He wasn't looking for a frontline trench. He was looking for a career in shadow. In January 1940, he joined the SS Totenkopfverbände, the Death's Head units. These men were distinct. They wore the skull and crossbones on their collars. It was a brand, a warning. Was he a soldier? No. The Totenkopf were administrators of misery. Since 1934, their sole purpose was the concentration camp system. Training focused on one goal, the total extraction of empathy. Instructors taught a simple doctrine. Prisoners were not humans. They were enemies of the state, biological threats. They deserved nothing but destruction. Muhsfeldt absorbed every word. He arrived at Auschwitz in August 1940. He started as a Blockführer, a block leader. He managed the work details. He watched the first chimneys rise. But Auschwitz was only the beginning of his technical education. In November 1941, the SS transferred him to Majdanek. The camp was a raw construction site of mud and barbed wire. Muhsfeldt didn't just join the staff, he became the chief of the crematorium. Administrative duty ended on the edge of the pit. In November 1941, Muhsfeldt arrived at Majdanek. The SS gave him a promotion. He became the chief of the crematorium. He didn't just manage the ovens. He commanded the units responsible for burning the evidence of mass murder. The system demanded efficiency. During the winter of 1941, the camp authorities introduced Zyklon B. It started with those too weak to work. By October 1942, the gas chambers were a routine. 3 shower rooms, grotesque concrete traps reconfigured into killing centers. 43,000 people died here in a single 24-hour period. The scale was industrial. Some arrived from across the Lublin region, only to vanish within an hour. Others died slowly. Starvation, typhus, and exhaustion cleared the barracks before the gas could. Muhsfeldt watched the chimneys. He ensured the fire never went out. His career path led directly to the trenches of November 3, 1943. Operation Harvest Festival. The administrative phase was over. Muhsfeldt stood by the edge of the mass graves to oversee the final execution of Heinrich Himmler's order. The administrative career of Erich Muhsfeldt shifted from the office to the edge of an open pit. By late October 1943, the crematorium chimneys at Majdanek could no longer keep up with the quota of death. Forced laborers received a new task: digging long, deep trenches. The official reason was air defense. The prisoners knew better. Operation Erntefest, the Harvest Festival. On the morning of November 3, 1943, SS and police units sealed the perimeters of Majdanek, Poniatowa, and Travniki. At Majdanek, the selection was swift. Jews were pulled from the lines. They marched toward the new trenches in groups. Then came the final order: strip naked, step into the pit. The massacre was a factory floor. 43,000 people murdered in 24 hours. That is 30 victims every minute. No breaks, no pauses. To hide the industrial slaughter, the SS turned to acoustics. Huge loudspeakers lined the execution site. They blared dance music at maximum volume. The brass and rhythm drowned out the chatter of machine guns. It muffled the screams of those waiting their turn. The slaughter at Majdanek and Travniki finished by sunset. At Poniatowa, the guns fired until November 4th. Between 42,000 and 43,000 Jews were dead. Heinrich Himmler had demanded a total solution to prisoner uprisings. Muhsfeldt ensured the order was executed to the letter. Official death certificates often cited heart failure. The real cause of death was frequently a metal hook on the crematorium wall. 43,000 victims in a single day was a mass operation, but the machine required daily maintenance. It was a matter of technical quotas. Why did a heavy truck engine idle outside the crematorium for hours? The Wehrmacht saved ammunition, but they never rationed fuel for acoustic camouflage. The logistics of the small-scale kill were precise. When natural mortality rates dropped, the guards filled the gap. They selected the weakest inmates from the morning roll call. Long queues formed outside the brick walls. These people were fully conscious. They waited in line to be hanged on specialized wall hooks before their bodies reached the furnace. Muhsfeldt managed the flow. He focused on the details. Witness Jerzy Lang watched him walk toward the execution site. Muhsfeldt carried 2 Jewish children in each hand. He did not use a leash or a guard. He held them like luggage. The executioners moved the children inside. Then the mechanics took over. A guard climbed into the cabin of a heavy transport truck. This vehicle usually moved corpses to the forest when the ovens were over capacity. He turned the key. The engine roared at high RPMs, vibrating the ground and drowning out the screams. A few minutes later, the muffled cracks of small arms fire cut through the exhaust. The driver kept his foot on the gas pedal. The system had rules. The operator had vices. Erich Muhsfeldt represented the collapse of bureaucratic order into pure, drunken chaos. He rarely appeared sober. Alcohol was the standard SS ration for execution squads. It functioned as a chemical shield against empathy. For Muhsfeldt, it was fuel. He prowled the barracks with a thick wooden truncheon. He didn't need a reason to strike. He needed a target. One prisoner made a mistake. He smiled at a wagon driver. Muhsfeldt saw it. The officer stepped forward. One punch to the jaw. The man hit the dirt. Muhsfeldt didn't stop. He kicked the ribs. He kicked the face. 3 teeth shattered against the gravel. Violence was his routine. During another beating, a victim collapsed at his feet. Muhsfeldt didn't reach for his holster. He grabbed a shovel handle. He drove the wood deep into the man's throat. Muhsfeldt walked away without looking back. The prisoner died slowly with the handle still lodged in his windpipe. The shovel handle was an improvisation. The oven became the method. Erich Muhsfeldt never needed a reason to kill. He preferred the ritual. He moved through the camp with a signature threat. He would stop a random prisoner. He would look into their eyes. "I will get you soon," he would say. "I am going to burn you alive." The threat was never hollow. In late 1943, a Polish woman in her late 20s was selected for the gas chambers. She did not go quietly. She lunged at Muhsfeldt. Her nails tore into his skin. She screamed a single question: "Why must I die?" Muhsfeldt wiped the blood from his face. His answer was a technical promise: "You will be burned alive." He ordered the guards to bind her hands. They tied her feet. Muhsfeldt watched the knots. The woman was lifted onto the iron transport trolley. The metal frame rattled. This was the same cart used for cold corpses. But she was warm. She was thrashing. Muhsfeldt signaled the stokers. The heavy iron door of the furnace swung open. A wall of orange light hit the room. Inside, the muffled furnace reached 1,000 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, the hair vanishes in a flash. The skin blackens and splits within a second. The trolley rolled forward. The woman's screams hit the brick walls. Then, the cart entered the fire. The heat triggered an immediate shock to the central nervous system. Consciousness lasted only long enough to feel the lungs ignite. The heavy steel door slammed shut. The screaming stopped. Efficiency in Majdanek became a resume. The SS command noticed. In May 1944, the killer received a promotion. The destination was Auschwitz-Birkenau. The scale changed. Majdanek was a factory. Birkenau was an industry. Its killing capacity was 20 times higher. Muhsfeldt took charge of the crematoria. His new task, the liquidation of hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews. The protocol remained the same, only the volume increased. At the ovens, his men used metal rods. They beat women to death. Muhsfeldt watched. He preferred the whip. He struck prisoners across the back. Survivors remembered one detail: a smile. It never left his face as he watched the living pushed into the fire. The experience would prove useful 3 months later during the final clearing of the ghettos. A group of boys from the Warsaw Ghetto arrived. They were small, terrified. During roll call, the children broke rank. They scattered across the camp, screaming for parents who were already dead. Muhsfeldt did not hesitate. He ordered the guards to round them up. He personally watched as every boy was driven into the gas chamber. While the ovens of Birkenau turned to ash, their chief operator sought a new role. He wanted to be a soldier. In August 1944, the SS transferred Muhsfeldt to the front. He traded the gas chambers for the chaos of the battle for Hungary. Combat left him wounded. By early April 1945, the system moved him again, this time to Flossenburg. The camp was a machine of despair. Prisoners chose suicide over the roll calls that lasted for hours. Guards used whips and gallows to maintain a breaking point. Muhsfeldt arrived just as the front collapsed. The evacuation began. It was a march of the living dead. Muhsfeldt walked the line with a pistol. Anyone too weak to move was a target. He shot dozens of exhausted men in the ditches. The War Merit Cross Second Class pinned to a mass murderer's uniform. The metal clicked against the wool of his tunic as the Reich recognized his service. Torture, executions, and the burning of the living were now officially merit. The war ended in the mud of the collapse. Muhsfeldt tried to vanish into the masses of refugees, but the mechanism of pursuit was faster. Allied forces intercepted him. In January 1947, a United States military court delivered a life sentence. It was only the beginning. New evidence surfaced, detailing the true scale of the slaughter. Poland submitted a formal request for his extradition. The testimony of the man who listened to the killer's heart became the foundation for the extradition. Miklos Nisli, a Hungarian Jewish physician, stood in the medical room. The air was thick with the smell of stale alcohol. Erich Muhsfeldt sat before him. The hangman of Majdanek was complaining. What bothers a man after 80 consecutive murders? High blood pressure. Muhsfeldt rolled up his sleeve. Dr. Nisli wrapped the cuff around his arm. He pumped the bulb and watched the needle. The pressure was dangerously high. The doctor spoke tentatively. He asked if the stress of the morning, the execution of 80 prisoners, had affected his heart. Muhsfeldt erupted. He shouted that numbers meant nothing. 1 inmate or 80, it was all the same. If his blood was boiling, it was the schnapps, not the slaughter. 80 people. That is the size of a full Wehrmacht infantry company, wiped out by one man in a single hour. The doctor saw the monster behind the pulse. A 16-year-old girl once survived the gas chamber, a miracle in the center of hell. Nisli begged for her life. He pleaded for a single exception. Muhsfeldt refused. He walked to the girl. He drew his pistol and fired a single shot into the back of her neck. The doctor's observations of a killer's blood pressure became an indictment in Krakow. The Supreme National Tribunal opened on November 24, 1947. In the courtroom, the air was thick, heavy. The echo of survivors' voices bounced off the high stone walls. 41 defendants sat in the dock. Among them was Arthur Liebehenschel, the former commandant of Auschwitz. Next to him stood Muhsfeldt. He was no longer a master of life and death. He was a prisoner. Muhsfeldt once told a Polish captive, "If you Poles weren't such fools, we wouldn't have to burn you in crematoria." The irony was terminal. Now, Polish judges sat above him. They listened to the logistics of his killings. They reviewed the quotas of the ovens. The court verified his personal hand in thousands of murders. He had turned the disposal of human remains into a factory process. In December 1947, the mechanism of the law finished its work. The tribunal found Erich Muhsfeldt guilty of crimes against humanity. There was no appeal. The judges handed down the sentence: death by hanging. The sentence was carried out 2 months later in the same prison where the Gestapo once ruled. January 24, 1948, Montelupik Prison in Krakow. The site of wartime massacres became the site of final settlement. Erich Muhsfeldt stood on the trapdoor. He was 34 years old, a young man at the height of his physical strength. The rope tightened. The pulse stopped. Executioners took the body down and loaded it into a transport. The biological end was not the final stop. The corpse arrived at the University of Krakow. Medical students waited in the anatomy theater. They laid Muhsfeldt on a cold, tiled table. The man who processed millions of bodies now became a specimen himself. Scalpels opened the skin of the SS officer for academic research. His family did not come for him. His wife died under Allied bombs. His son disappeared on the Eastern Front. Muhsfeldt left nothing but a legacy of industrial slaughter. How many did he help kill? In Majdanek alone, the count reached 130,000. But the scale of his work at Auschwitz was different. 1.1 million victims. A population the size of modern-day Cologne wiped out. No one wept for the baker from Iserlohn. 1.1 million dead in Auschwitz. His body vanished in the anatomy lab. But the archives kept the records. Erich Muhsfeldt was not born a monster. He was a baker. a baker turned butcher. In his hometown of Iserlohn, he kneaded dough. He sold bread to neighbors. He was a husband. He was a father. By 1940, the baker was a specialist in mass disposal. The man who once created food now managed the industrial destruction of human life. Muhsfeldt did not just follow orders, he optimized them. He stood by the pits. He watched the furnaces. He personally pushed children into the fire. The transformation was complete. The ordinary citizen had surrendered every ounce of his humanity to the machine. Evil thrives in the shadows of silence. At Timeless World, we refuse to let these names disappear. History is not comfortable. It is necessary. The mechanism of justice requires your action. Smash the like button to spread this history. Subscribe to Timeless World and hit the bell for more uncomfortable truths. Share this video with those who must remember. Comment below with the next investigation you want to see. Muhsfeldt died on the gallows in January 1948.